I say, if you don't mind, if I just go straight into a few wee questions, because forgive my ignorance, Liam. I know a little bit about you, but I'd be very interested to hear more about your background, like how you got to where you are and some of the steps along the way.
Yeah, of course. So I studied chemistry at university, so qualified with a master's in chemistry. Having left university, my first role was working in radiochemical labs. So largely responsible for, or significant part of my role was being responsible for kind of processing of kind of low-level radioactive waste, which I guess is where I got my my first introduction into kind of waste management within the workplace. So from there, from the nice cozy labs, I went and worked for an environmental consultancy. So first role was on a coke works up in Sunderland in January, which was a bit of a change, and then spent a few years working for that consultancy, predominantly on kind of contaminated land, so coke work, gas work, remediation projects, so providing environmental and health and safety monitoring and consultation. So from there, I then moved, I suppose, into the core waste industry. So working for some of the biggest waste management companies in the UK, predominantly within the landfill departments, with roles that have typically been taking responsibility for compliance with regards for environmental performance, as well as health and safety. Partway through that time, my role has moved from like kind of a regional role to a national role, which introduces its own challenges. And obviously, as you've mentioned, I've kind of recently taken on the position of chair of the IOSH Environmental Waste Management Group. And I'm kind of really looking forward to working with an excellent team, kind of including yourself, and seeing what we can do to help drive kind of safety improvements within the sector. Obviously, a sector that traditionally hasn't performed that well when it comes to safety. So there's kind of some really exciting work in the pipeline there that I'm really looking forward to progressing over the next couple of years.
Oh, that's brilliant. I have to say, very, very interesting. A lot of things I didn't know. So the chemical, but the chemistry background, that must be fascinating. And you must have touched on process safety in the early stages of your career.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in hindsight, when I look back at my time at university and kind of thinking about it now, is I suppose what surprises me is kind of the lack of health and safety within the kind of academic sector. You kind of 18-year-olds given all these dangerous chemicals and kind of dangerous processes, and I see kind of fairly limited supervision as to kind of how that's been managed. And it's certainly kind of when I kind of moved into the kind of industry, certainly one of kind of the kind of the changes that that kind of I recognised was, I suppose in particular being in a radiochemical, even though it was kind of low level, it was still enough radiation to do yourself harm if you weren't careful. But you're certainly going into an environment where all kind of processes were being done in kind of fume cupboards. Solvents were kind of stored in a particular way. Certainly in terms of kind of PPE and kind of clean gloves, clean overalls, kind of contamination monitoring kind of before and at the end of the day, that certainly wasn't present in the kind of academic background. So yeah, I suppose in many ways what surprised me about it was when I went to work in the radiochemical labs, and you're going in, you're coming out, you're doing kind of full body kind of radiation monitoring kind of as you leave. And I think when you first go into that environment, it's quite scary. But I think what struck me is how kind of relaxed about it that the kind of the people that have been working in it for 30 years were. And certainly something I found very interesting. And that kind of, I suppose, balance between, like, obviously the concern of working with radiation, but I think as a lot of people kind of in that environment pointed out, that normally if you walk into a chemistry lab, you can smell it, you can smell the solvents. In these labs you didn't, because of like the kind of the extra ventilation, the extra controls that were in place. And actually, in terms of working in a chemistry lab, it's probably almost safer to be working in a radiochemical lab because of the extra precautions that are in place, rather than I suppose a traditional lab. Certainly, of the time. I'm sure that kind of safety processes have moved on a lot since then. But where you would probably find that you are kind of a lot more exposed to solvents and other chemicals.
Well, here, I'm just worried of time. If you don't mind, and I'm just going to ask really about your objectives or your mission statement, some of the things that you're hoping to achieve over the duration of your career.
Yeah, I think as we just touched on, really, the waste industry kind of has been going through a huge change, and it's kind of continuing to go through a change. I think probably over the next 5 years we're going to see an acceleration of that change. And I suppose it's from this kind of linear system of, the industry, it takes people's waste, puts it in a landfill, puts a cover over it, and well, the layperson might say forgets about it, but those of us who work in the landfill industry know it's not forgotten about. It requires, I think, intensive management for many years, but we're kind of moving away from that, and instead of seeing waste as just something that we put in a landfill, we're seeing it as a product and a resource. And with that comes kind of a circularity. And the waste industry has got a kind of such an important role to play in this drive to a circular economy. And it is doing and needs to kind of step up to achieve that. And I suppose I just want to play my part in kind of helping the industry on that journey, and making sure that it's done in a kind of an environmentally responsible way, and also with responsibility for kind of health, safety, and welfare. And I think, as we talk about the environmental and waste management group, and I think that's just one of the ways that we can hopefully help to make a difference to kind of make the industry, which has historically and unfortunately continues to perform quite poorly in terms of certainly in terms of its safety performance, and help on that journey to I suppose a more kind of responsible industry that doesn't harm its employees as much as it does currently, unfortunately.
But I must admit, I completely agree with you on that one. I'd say I don't want to be an apologist for the industry. That being said, though, it certainly does lead to some serious incidents when it goes wrong on the waste side. As we well know, the consequences are severe. Again, without being too much of an apologist for the industry, I do have some sympathy for the operators and those in the industry, in the sense that of all industries, it just keeps going. The material keeps on coming, and it needs to be managed, and it needs to be managed sustainably and safely. And I'm sure many of the workers in the industry can attest for this, in the sense that, as we're getting close to Christmas time, for example, a lot of parts of the industry are actually ramping up when everyone else is starting to wind down and get ready for a quiet time of the year. A lot of the site operators are starting to ramp up because they know there's more material coming to them, and the same for the duration after the Christmas months, and same for Easter and different times. So completely agree with everything you said. I really do. And without being too much of an apologist for the industry, yeah, it's definitely a challenge to get it all done sustainably and safely. And completely agree again in the sense that there's so much changes coming down the horizon. You know, as we're moving towards the end of waste, there's a lot of changes to take place within, I suppose, society, really, never mind even just the world of health and safety or waste, in the sense that, you know, we need to move towards a circular economy. We need to get manufacturers to move away from disposable goods and start to move back towards a repair-based society. And then there's all these jobs that are going to need to come back again, where we're going to have to get people trained up and, you know, how to recover, reuse, repair, and instead of just going dispose and replace.
Obviously, the industry, kind of as we've discussed previously, has been transitioning so to this kind of resource and kind of circular economy. And if you go back 20 years, the vast majority of waste that was produced would have either gone to landfill or incineration. Nowadays, we see a lot more kind of go into recycling, and kind of with the changes in legislation that are coming up. So the ban on or elimination of biodegradable waste to landfill, and the inclusion of energy from waste facilities within the emissions trading scheme, the carbon emissions trading scheme. That's going to push more and more waste into the in particular, I suggest MRFs, and that's going to come with its own risks. I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of operators out there looking to kind of expand their facilities. We know that they generally already operate in kind of a very tight footprint, and potentially we're going to have more operations happening in the same space, in facilities where kind of risk is already quite high, particularly in terms of like transport and kind of movements around the site. We're also going to have kind of a lot of probably new operators, new sites, maybe people kind of working with infrastructure that maybe they're not that experienced working with, and obviously that's going to come with risk. I think it's really important that that's managed appropriately if we're ultimately going to see these injury statistics start to come down.
Very, very interesting, because yeah, change management. I often find change management can be quite a challenge in the industry, in the sense that it is moving so fast with more and more automated machinery and changes in process and changes in material streams. It can be a challenge for the individuals that are planning ahead and starting to decide in procurement what machinery they're going to need to procure 6 months, a year down the road, and how they're going to install it, where it fits on the site, how to get people trained up to use this new machinery. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Change management, big challenge for those in the industry.
Definitely.
I suppose, if you don't mind, Liam, would say, if I was to change tactic and was to ask you about your biggest career challenges, I'd be very interested. You know, you've had such a varied career. I'd be very interested in some of your biggest challenges.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think inevitably the challenges come when that word you just mentioned, change, comes. And I think in terms of myself, I'd certainly look to when I moved from the kind of laboratory environment, and I suppose what I describe as probably a very safe environment. You're kind of working with kind of PhD chemists who are kind of all typically very kind of quiet and polite, and then suddenly I find myself working on a contaminated land remediation in Sunderland. Kind of very different environment, different ways of kind of interacting with people. Certainly, I guess some of what I saw on the site, I didn't particularly like. And I suppose particularly looking kind of further on down my career, that actually some of the kind of behaviours and processes on site were not particularly safe or managed appropriately. Obviously, I'm not going to mention any names, but yeah, that was a kind of a difficult environment. But I think ultimately I did well. I say adapted quickly, and I think that's what you need to do in that environment. And I think it was a kind of a really important career step for me. I kind of enjoyed it despite the challenges. I think then looking at the other changes, so certainly when I took on health and safety responsibility, I mean that was, although it's something that I'd always be kind of involved in and aware of, I suppose to actually have responsibility suddenly for, to be in the role of compliance manager when kind of health and safety is part of that compliance, that was a challenge. I kind of did the kind of NEBOSH certificate in occupational safety and health, which helped. But then I think obviously kind of getting involved with IOSH and I suppose really engaging in professional development was kind of really important for me to kind of develop in that role. And then finally, I think the other challenge is that kind of, I suppose, as I progressed in my career, I went from having a regional role where I was working on sites that I was kind of very familiar with. I knew everybody that worked on all of the sites. And then that kind of transitioned into a national role where I didn't know I suppose the kind of the finer details of all of the sites, and I suppose had to take a more kind of higher level and had to be more, I suppose I had to kind of prioritize and had to, I suppose, use my experience to kind of really identify where the risk lies and use that kind of experience to kind of focus my energy on the parts of the kind of the business that I consider to be the biggest risk. And I think that was an important challenge, that kind of definition from kind of knowing every detail of every site to kind of not knowing it was definitely an interesting challenge.
Wow, that's a really interesting answer. I say if I go back to the first one, so let me think. First challenge coming into the industry, it can be a culture shock, can't it? It's certainly not for
Yeah.
everyone. If I'm honest, it's one thing I would hope to see change in the future. I would like to see the industry being seen and recognised as an industry that people seek out. As I
Yeah.
say, you've heard me say in the past, we're all stakeholders in the industry, in one way or another, whether it be producing waste at home domestically or as part of a business. It would just be great to see the industry get recognised for the value that it adds to society and people nearly to seek it out as a first option in the career. And a bit like yourself, I was late into waste. I spent most of the early stages of my career in and around construction and associated industries, and definitely found it a bit of a culture shock and a bit of a challenge to get the boots on the ground and sort of start to assess and see what good looks like, what bad looks like, and what needs to change and how we go about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's come on a long way. It's definitely on that journey. But as I say, I still think there's further to go as the statistics demonstrate. There is more that can be done.
I must admit, I do agree. In the sense that I think in the world of health and safety, the war will never be won. We just move from one battle to the next, and maybe the language I'm using isn't the most appropriate around battling and wars, but because it shouldn't be that way. And generally, a collaborative approach is the winning ticket. Uh, but yeah, I do think that we're never going to be at the destination. We're always on that journey to reduce the risk, one way or another, to try and get people home safe.
Well, there'll always be new technologies that that come in that bring additional risks. I think also what I guess we'd find that if we ever did get into a position where we were really safe, then organizations would stop investing so much in safety, and we'd probably fall back. And I suppose eventually we'll reach an equilibrium where industry will feel that the kind of the risk is acceptable.
Yes, we've done enough. We've got it as low as reasonably practicable, and the people are going home
Yeah.
safe to their families. And
Yes.
great answer. Here, do you know, forgive me, you'd mentioned something else I thought was interesting. So when you took on health and safety part of the business, when you took on that responsibility too, in a compliance manager role, it's a very interesting title. And interesting, I have colleagues over here that, you know, take the compliance, you know, role as the job title. I've often perceived, and maybe it's just because I'm an Irishman in Northern Ireland, I often perceive, I wonder, does the word compliance make it that wee bit harder with people at the sharp end of it? But it's just a thought, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying it's the right answer. It's just a thought.
Never really something that I've considered. So I mean, I see my kind of, you know, the word compliance. It's with legislation. It's with kind of the company's policies and procedures, and I suppose it's twofold. It's making sure that those policies and procedures align with legislation, but then also making sure that kind of the business on the ground is aligning with the policy and procedures. So I don't think I've ever seen that as an issue. If I'm being honest, it's always
No, very good. Very good. It's you know, 100% in the sense the compliance with legal and regulatory requirements, it's in compliance with insurance policy requirements, and compliance with internal
yeah.
policies. Yes, 100%. Maybe it's just the likes of me over here, but sometimes I feel that, you know, if I use the term compliance too much with people out in the ground, I can start to lose them a wee bit. That's maybe just me over in Ireland, you know.
Yeah, and obviously you need to adapt your approach to different people. Probably the way
Yes.
I would speak to a director and discuss these matters with a director would be different to how I would like a machine operator. And I think it's about kind of recognizing it. It's certainly in some environments it can be a kind of I suppose a negative connotation almost around health and safety and kind of compliance. And I suppose sometimes you can, if you can, I suppose move it away from a health and safety conversation, almost just like a procedure or a process conversation. You know, if you can make I think maybe call like something like a safe system of work, if you could
Mhm.
talk to people and discuss it as more of as a method statement,
Yes.
it's instructing the business how to do a job. You know, we want to know that you know, if you are on leave next week and somebody else comes in, we need to be able to show them what you do. And I suppose then you can move the conversation a little bit away from kind of safety and more to, as I said, the process, but obviously be mindful of making sure that process is developed with safety in mind.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. And I must admit, I do agree in the sense that we have to get the buy-in from the guys. We have to get their input on the systems of work and the procedures. You know, they're going to be able to tell us whether these systems of work and procedures are actually real and in practice, and
Yeah.
if there's any gaps or holes that we need to be looking at. I mean, personally, I find just respect from a fellow human, it goes a long way, you know. So, um, respect in every role in the business, no matter what it is, it's all adding value to the business, from, you know, the person that's controlling access onto the site to the person who's you know, maintaining housekeeping in the facilities, and right up to the managing director's office. We're all playing an equal and valuable role in the continued safe operation of the business, and that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think if you speak with people and consult with people, generally they're quite pleased that they're being consulted, and I think that gets much better buy-in than it's almost like how do you do your role, and writing down and recording how they do their role, than giving them a piece of paper and saying, this is how to do your job.
Yes. Yes.
I wouldn't have a clue how to operate an excavator.
That's a great point.
So I'm kind of relying on you to tell me how to do it and how to do it safely.
That's a real pearl of wisdom. No, it's brilliant. I must admit, because I'm the same myself. I mean, rather than like trying to tell people how to do their job, it's more about, well, you tell me how you're currently doing your job. Let me watch and observe how this is currently being done. Have you ever thought about this, or what about that, or what about this risk? Is there a better way? Is there a different piece of equipment? And nearly the open questions, through these open questions, and you start to get some real value. And before you know it, you're able to reflect on some of the lessons that you've got from the people doing the work that then actually influences and works towards reducing the risk for the activity. So it's a brilliant point. Brilliant.
Definitely.
Now, I get worry of time, Liam, and I say I appreciate getting so much of your time today. I suppose this really last question. Have you any advice? Have you any advice for anybody starting out? Have you any advice for the next generation coming through?
Yeah, and I think so I've written down a few things that I think have been important to me, and I think the first one is to kind of seek out mentors and people who you kind of recognize do their job or a particular part of their job or their role well. And just, I suppose, observe how they do that, and think about how you can kind of adopt those characteristics. And I mean, it can be formal mentoring. It doesn't have to be. The mentor doesn't even have to know that they're a mentor to you. If you just kind of observe them and kind of think about the way they operate, and think about how you can adopt that into your own approach. I think that's definitely something that I've found very beneficial myself, and I've certainly taken on hopefully characteristics, the kind of good characteristics of kind of the many good people I've been fortunate to work with throughout my career. The other thing is to commit to professional development. So join up to IOSH, CIWM, IEMA, or kind of whatever kind of membership is relevant to your career. Read the magazines, sign up to the email bulletins. Even if you're just reading the headlines and the kind of the first paragraph, just be kind of familiar with what's going on in the industry. Particularly like some of the stuff that's on the IOSH kind of blueprint. There's some really good resources there, and particularly about I think things like leadership and negotiation and communication, and kind of all of these things that I suppose unless you do a specific course, you might not get an opportunity to do. But it's really kind of some really useful resources that enable you just to kind of think about your own approach and how you can kind of adapt that approach to your work to make you better at your job. And then finally, I'd just say kind of think about the way you kind of conduct yourself. Always kind of conduct yourself professionally. No matter what your role is, you can be a leader. People, if you follow the rules, people will hopefully follow you. So even simple things like following the site speed limits and using the kind of designated walking routes. I think that can all kind of help. Help kind of make you stand out as a leader, but also hopefully kind of encourage safer behaviours within your your organization. I say, I think, follow the company's policy and procedure. I mean, it's important to kind of recognize that you represent your company. You might not like everything that your company does. There might be things that you wish could be done differently, but I think a lot of the time it's about taking a view and trying to understand that there's good people running this business, and although you don't like the way they do this and you think they could do this better, kind of recognizing that there's probably a very good reason for the approach that's taken. I suppose depending on the kind of the scale of your business and how much you're kind of in touch with kind of top management, then I'd say if there's something you can improve, go to management with solutions. I'd say try and avoid getting involved in say like negative conversations, particularly around health and safety. I think we've probably a lot of us have experienced environments where kind of people don't like particular kind of structures or cultures within the organization, and I think if you identify that, then I suppose rather than kind of adding fuel to that fire, go and have kind of a sensible conversation with your line manager about it, and try and I suppose take a more constructive view on it, rather than maybe kind of destructive conversations with colleagues that can, I suppose, create a negative culture within your organization. So yeah, that's
Well, highly effective and useful, beneficial advice. I mean, right back at the start, taking on mentors is yeah, it's great advice, and I would actually encourage people to have a look at the IOSH mentoring platform. It's quite good. You can join as a mentee or a mentor, and actually reverse mentoring is quite an interesting one. It's actually one I'm actually considering taking on myself. Somebody to reverse mentor me could be quite interesting. And I also agree the continual professional development, the blueprint, I find is a great platform to be, maintaining CPD. I must admit, in the early stages, I preferred the old my IOSH model, and it did take me a few months of getting around or getting up to speed with blueprint. But see, now I love the blueprint. It's a brilliant way to continue to document my CPD, and as you say, all the resources available there is fantastic.
Yeah.
And let me think then, there's another piece there that was really valuable. Yeah, about avoiding negative conversations, I think is an interesting one. Because on one hand, I agree, but on the other hand, I think about the importance of the difficult conversations and the challenging conversations. But I understand, appreciate the distinction that you're making. And what I mean by that is, yes, we can have a difficult and challenging conversation that has good intent, with constructive criticism or feedback with a solution and objective of where we need to be,
Yes.
versus derogatory, negative, tone or about a company or an organization or a culture. So I can completely see the distinction and completely agree the importance of it.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely important to make that distinction, that difficult conversations are important, and say I would always encourage everybody, if there's something they don't like about an organization, to speak to their line manager about it. But at the same time, say it's that destructive conversation that I've certainly seen in some workplaces, and it's easy, especially as I suppose in the early stages of your career, to kind of, I suppose it's almost easier to fit in by joining in with those conversations, and so it's recognizing that you are kind of representing your business. There's probably a good reason, but if you think there's something that could be changed in your working environment for the better, then then have a conversations with the people who can make a change. If you can't, I mean, make the change you can, and it kind of you want to see within an organization. Let's say rather than just complaining about it, I suppose is.
I'm right with you there, Liam. I often
I'm
think,
trying to get to.
and I've often said it to other people too, and when some individuals in a negative headspace in different conversations in different places, I've often said to them, we can't change it from home. We just can't change it from home. And as I say, we do see an opportunity for improvement, as you rightly say, by having that constructive conversation with the leaders in the organization that have the ability to influence and make that change. And I guess the only other thing I'd preface is, and I'm sure you would completely agree with me on this, but this is influenced by a previous conversation, that people in leadership roles need to make sure that they're given enough of a platform for all the voices to be heard. That they're having a fair and a psychologically safe environment where people feel comfortable and confident to make a comment or to have their opinion voiced. Because I often feel that sometimes it's the quieter voices around the room sometimes that have nearly a lot of value to say and a lot of value to add, but sometimes don't feel psychologically safe to air their thoughts. I don't know if that is something you would agree with, Liam, or your thoughts is on that point.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think you need to have sensible conversations, constructive conversations. I think every employee should be encouraged to kind of challenge and to ask questions. Why are we doing like this? Couldn't we do it like this? Wouldn't it be better to do it like this? And to feel that's encouraging. I suppose almost leading on from that, I'd also say where events happen, incidents happen, accidents happen, whatever you want to call it, but dealing with that in a sensible way as well. But I've certainly seen examples in the past where if there's an accident, it's almost disciplinary action will be taken against the person that has that incident. And it's certainly something when I talk about kind of the national role, you're working on dispersed sites across a business, that if people fear that there will be repercussions because of an accident that's happened on site, that if nobody's there to see the accident happen, the incident happen, and then you'll never learn from it.
That's right. That's right.
And I think if you can give employees the confidence that if something happens, they can raise it, and we can discuss it and learn from it. I think that's a sign of a good business.
And Liam, as much as I would love to spend another half an hour talking about this very subject, an accident investigation, I think that's possibly the best way just to leave it. Completely agree. Brilliant point to finish on. And hopefully someday we can pick up the conversation around accident investigation and crisis management response.
Fantastic.
I say, look, thank you very much for your time, Liam. An absolute pleasure. And I do look forward to the next conversation with you when the time's right.
Thank you, David. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, sir.